Ooh, okay. All right, so I'm gonna present from sitting because we're doing something else with we're doing Zoom and a presentation at the same time. So I want to introduce Courtney. She's our advocacy manager. She is a plethora of information and super wise and excellent at her job. So she is going to go over just the different elements of a court report tonight and just kind of help to prepare you to write one when the time comes. And always remember that we're here to help you. You are never siloed. You are never alone. We are here. So when you go to write your first court report, or even your third, fourth, or fifth court report, your case coordinator is your person, and we are getting ready to start office hours where we'll have at least one case coordinator in-house that you can come and visit with and sit with, and they will walk you through all of those things. But this is a good overview of what it is like to write a court report. So I'm going to screen share here, hopefully. Sure, standard sounds great. All right. Okay.
So I'm Courtney. I'll start a little bit by just explaining what we're new, aren't working cases yet. Some of you are veterans. But we've just started this case coordinator role in the last year, 6 months to a year. So used to volunteer would like go and work the case, like do all the grunt work and write a court report and like send it off into like this CASA.org, who knows what, and you never know like what happens to it after that other than pop up in court when you went in for your review hearing. And so some of these changes we were thinking like that's a lot to do and not get feedback and not really know your role. So now you have case coordinators who, like when you sit down to write your first court report, you can ask them like, what do I need to write? What do I need to include? And it's overwhelming. Like this is a lot of information. It's like if you like writing in school, you're good. If you didn't like it, you're just like what? And then you have to like hand it to the parents when you go to court, and that can be a little overwhelming because it's not always like, oh, you're wonderful. So now it goes through. So like you'll write it with your case coordinator if you choose, or on your own, however you're comfortable with, because we'll provide you with the template. And then you'll submit it to your case coordinator and they'll read over it because hopefully they've met with you monthly and they kind of have an idea already of what you're dealing with. And then they send it to me and I read it and sign it and send it to, well, Kermit, then we submit it to the judge. Judge usually reads them like 24 hours before the case, so he has an idea of what we're recommending. Sometimes not. And he looks at it in court and is like, so you're recommending. So like when you can kind of tell if he's read it or not, then that's what you would speak on, or something you really want to like drill home to him, you would speak on that. So anyway, tips and guidelines. We use a standard template. Lauren will send it if you've not already gotten it. Some of you have already written them. The template is a good idea when you first get a case to go ahead and kind of start filling out as much of the information as you know, because like the top part might stay the same, but then the case status or current status is what you're going to update. That just kind of helps get you started. We always type them. It says no longer than 7 pages. That's very, very rare. Like most of them are tops 3-4 pages. This depends if there's a lot of children in one report, you could get closer to 7 pages. But the majority of the time it's going to be under 4 pages. It's child focused and fact based. So the judge wants to hear about the children. He wants to know if they're in extracurriculars. He wants to know how they're doing in school. He wants to know if they're happy in their placement, bonded with placement. And then he wants to know, you know, are they visiting parents and how is that going? Those are the main like child focused things. Fact-based means like we don't want to give an opinion about what we think the parent's motivation or lack of motivation is, or mom clearly doesn't love her kids, or you know, anything like that. There are other times where I say it is clear that children, but they need to improve on these things, you know. So very like fact-based, and I like to speak to like directly to parents or directly to service providers to get those facts and not rely on placement, because if we're hearing it straight from the source, sometimes placement is a little iffy to be like your source person. So if at all possible, speak with a visit supervisor or a teacher, you know, something like that to get your information. So say the kids go for a supervised visit, and then the kids are brought back home to placement. And the supervisor tells placement, oh, mom did this and mom did that, and you know, she didn't bring snacks and she didn't change the diaper, and you know, whatever. So you hear that from placement, so you're gonna go and put that in your report. I would prefer you hear that, like if you hear that, say placement tells you that, get the contact information and call the visit supervisor yourself and ask them, so what happened to the visit? Because not that placement is going to twist things, but sometimes they might. And I don't want there to be any question about placement having an ulterior motive. So maybe they, you know, their perception, maybe the visit supervisor was just saying, you know, mom only brought Fruit Loops today and I wish she had brought the meal, and placement's like, she didn't even feed them. So, you know, it's not 100% accurate. So I like to go straight to the source and not BCS always either, because theirs might also be, they might leave things out. So I just like to get it directly from like that service provider. That's their job, to take every single note of what happened. So then narratives are written in the third person. CASA believes that March of the 10. I like to write it that way too. I usually write CASA instead of I, or names or anything like that. Not everybody does. Some of them write I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just, I think it's more formal to just say, you know, CASA believes that. And plus it's like the whole program. Because by the time it gets to the judge, we all support whatever's in this report. So when you say CASA believes, yeah, we all believe it, or else it's not going to get submitted. So, and then each child will have their own CASA court report if there's different fathers. Or different mothers. We do have that, like where one dad has, you know, working children, however it is. If they don't have the same mom and dad, they have to go on separate reports, because we hand them to parents when we go to court, and you can't give one child to a different father because they're not, you know, able to have that information. But if it's both mom and dad, they're able to have all that information. So the components of the court report, some of you that have been here for a while, you're going to have, first of all, like the children's names, their date of birth, the cause number. It always says children in need of services, because that's what CHINs are. And then your name, whatever the hearing date is, and then the type of hearing. That's all standard. The date and the type of hearing will change each time. It used to say, not history, but like petition and allegations. And it was kind of copied from the DCS report and what their petition and allegations are. But we've kind of evolved that a little bit to, we don't really want to copy and paste from BCS, because Judge gets that in like really thick reports from BCS. So I like to make it more like a summary. So basically we're going to kind of give a little bit of information about why the children were removed, but we don't need to go into the whole, like at this time on this date, the police were called, you know, whatever. We'll just say, you know, DCS received a call alleging the children were victims of neglect perpetrated by their father. The report alleged emotional abuse, and just kind of summarize that. And then anything that happens substantial. So each review period is 6 months. So say we go for a review hearing today. In 6 months, we're going to have a permanency hearing. Right now, there are 375 CHINs cases in Floyd County. So that's how many children judges hearing it out on a regular basis. So from 6 months in time, you might not remember everything we talked about today at the review hearing. So if there's something significant that we talked about in the review hearing, then I like to kind of bump it up to that history and just put like a little one-liner, like, you know, in this example that you guys have, I just added on, like, during a custody modification hearing, the court advised that both parents complete the clinical assessment, completed ED assessment, and the court advised to provide child support. So the judge remembers now when we go into the permanency And then he can go on and read about what's happening current. So then when we get to the current status, that's where you start talking about the kids, you know. This child loves to play volleyball, they're, you know, doing great in school, this child is struggling a little bit with math, but, you know, just really paint that picture so judge can kind of envision like if he was sitting there and talking to the child, like all the juice on the child. I put that on the first paragraph. And then I'll do the parents typically in like separate entries. So after we talk about the child, I like to go in and like, okay, here's what mom's doing or not doing, paint that picture. Okay, here's what dad is doing or not doing. If you have no contact with the father, never had any, or a mom, I don't write a paragraph about it. It's pretty self-explanatory. We're not saying anything about them. We don't know anything about them. And judge is going to kind of get that when DCS gives their report, like they had no participation or contact, so we don't really need to include them in that. So then, depending on the type of hearing, if it's a review hearing, you're really just kind of giving the current status. If it's a permanency hearing, we want to make a recommendation. For permanency hearing, and they're going to help every 12 months after that. So, most likely, but for 12 months, you're going to have a continue to work with communication. Something, a little bit, maybe a little bit, or if you're doing something uncomfortable, how does it look? Then you can so when it is a permanency hearing, we want to make sure that we've got something in our report that works. The reason that that's super important is because you have a permanency hearing, keep together, and testifying in a quickly, in my permanency report, I would recommend it. And by the time we got to the CPR actually, more than supporting that, and then I put the header is like, what, your report right here said. So, why are you, they kind of have to be that. So, and then our contact log should always have the child. You can put like first day that you contact. You can put parents, something like this. You don't have to put it in time. Same with the parents, like around out. If you speak to somebody else, and then our recommendations, number one is always the same. So it's always going to be the same. That child or children, the main children in the services. That never changes. Except for if it is on permanency, I add. Sometimes I'll put still reunification with mother because I don't want them to be reunified with father, or until TPR is granted, adoption is achieved, in that one line. So then you're making your permanency recommendation. If it's just the review hearing, you might not have anything to add on to the end of that. So it would just be, you know, until and this honorable court would end the sentence. Additional recommendations, you might recommend a child, we saw a child this week which had his two hands and clear delays, and so we feel like he should probably have a first step evaluation. So we put that as a recommendation. So then when we're standing in front of the judge, which is talking to DCS, he's gonna be like, well, also recommends first step evaluation. And then he'll look at them and say, are you working on that? Or is that something that you can do? Sometimes if he's really in a hurry and he hasn't read the whole report, he's gonna focus on those recommendations. So you'll want to make sure, like, if you want services, if you want suspension of visits, you want DCS to file TPR, anything that you really want to happen, then we'll put that in as a recommendation. And so then number 1 and number 5 always stay the same. So the last one is for any and all relief is deemed just and proper by the honorable court. And then that's it. So that's your example of your template that you'll get. So when you're filling it out, when you get it, you're going to change what's in red. If you have any questions or anything about like where to find the cause number, if there's multiple children, the last 3 of that cause number is going to be unique assigned to that child. So we can point you to where you would go in Optimed to find out, which last 3 numbers goes with which child. And then you'll just change all the information that's in red and fill in your own information. So history, we talked about that. And the current status. Does anybody have any questions about any of the history, current status, recommendations, or anything that I've blabbed yet? Okay. I think we're good there. Placement is also another recommendation too that we like to put in. If you're fine with placement, you don't want it to change, you don't have to say that. Like, you can either say that you want the children to remain in their current placement. If it doesn't look like, sometimes it might look like DCF is looking to change that placement. If you don't want it to change, then you could just say they should stay in their current placement. If you're not happy with the placement, then you might say, like another one where it's a longer case, I like to ask pretty early on when I'm doing my visits with the placement if they're pre-adopt or not. So then if they say no, we're not pre-adopt, we're just simply offering foster care. As you get to that permanency level, when you get to that 12-month mark, if it looks like parents aren't doing anything and there's a high likelihood that it's going to go to TPR, I always throw in a line about DCS should seek a pre-adopt placement. Because, that was child's been with his family for 12 months and they're probably gonna have to move, get adjusted to a new family, and that's more trauma. So as soon as you can kind of tell this isn't gonna go back home, then I like to just kind of call them on the table and say, let's start looking for another placement. I think that's good for that. Contact log, we talked about that. Just anybody you have regular contact with. You can put, like, if you've not had any contact with mom, you can put mom's name and put no contact if you want to. We have some where their moms aren't. So DCF's policy is every single case they get, they list under the mom's name. So even if like a parent has a split 50-50 situation with the mom and the dad, like for custody, if the children are removed from mom and even like placed with dad because he wasn't the perpetrator of the abuse or neglect, it's going to be listed in DCS under mom's name. So unfortunately, dad's just kind of shoved to the side, and typically, like, they go through the whole, we will prove the father that the mother named, or the father, if the father hasn't like established a true custody, then they're always listed as a non-custodial. If a father is a non-custodial, even though everybody in the room knows that he is the father, they have to go through these like unknown father motions. And so that's why I say, like, you can list mom, no contact, that's going to speak louder. If you list like dad, no contact, sometimes that really doesn't, unless there's a dad that's real active, most of the time it doesn't really matter, unfortunately. So. And then, yeah, the recommendations, things you want judge to act on, speak on. We had a case today where in my recommendations, it said that I would like them to suspend visits. So judge repeated that on record. To me, that's one of the most important things is if we can get judge to say on record what we want to see happen, even if it doesn't go that way in the future, at least we know we're on record saying like what we thought should happen. So if something happens down the road, the case comes back or whatever, there's a record of CASA making a recommendation that might be different than what DCS wanted, might be the same, might be different than what judge ordered. So I like to be really like thoughtful about what my recommendations are. So yeah, recommendations are based on fact. A lot of this is your opinion, but you're not going to say like, I just really don't like mom, so I'm just gonna recommend that she doesn't reunify, or, you know, dad cussed me out at a CFTM, so that's it, he's not getting anything, because that's more of an opinion. So you really want facts to back up your recommendation. Mom has done nothing to be compliant with the dispositional, so, you know, those are facts. Mom's still using substances, like all of those are facts that would back up your recommendations. Yeah, I think that's good. We've covered the recommendations. Yeah, so this is a little bit of Judge one time in one of his swearing-ins, he gave a really good speech about exactly what he looked for CASA to provide to him. So these are some of the things that he said. He wants to know who is important in that child's life. So maybe the child's like favorite person is mom, and they just can't live with mom anymore. And you're going to say, you know, this child is extremely bonded to mom and would really want mom to be able to reunify. Or maybe it's an uncle who they have visitation with, or the grandparents that they're placed with, or their foster family that they're bonded with. Whatever it is, Judge wants to know like who those important people are, how the child's doing in school. Are there issues with the visiting parents? Like, are the parents showing up? Or if the parents show up, are they belittling the kids? Is there a bond, or the parents on their cell phone the whole time? You know, if we can find out things like that and share with Judge, it's important, because as we get to, if the case goes to TPR, he's gonna ask, how many visits did your kids have? What was the quality of the visit? Did the parents ever go beyond supervised visits? Maybe they say, if you stay at a supervised level and we're 15 months down the line and they want a TPR, if you've never moved out of supervised, it's not really looking very good. So he can come back and read these reports and he'll ask, you know, did they ever have a child home visit? Did they ever progress? Because that tells a lot when he's making the decision. Are there therapy concerns? If you know the child has a lot of trauma and is having behaviors, would really benefit from just talking it out. A lot of times our kids are an afterthought, because like if you've been on a case from the beginning, you can kind of see like all the work is on getting the assessments for the parents, getting the parents' drug screens, making sure their referrals are put in, and the children are in placement. But we're still focusing on everything for the kid, for the parents. So you're like 7, 8 months down the line, and it's like, this child's not been put in therapy yet. They're still having behaviors. They need help. So that's where we would step in and as early as possible, start making these recommendations so it doesn't get to the 12-month mark and the child hasn't received any kind of services yet. Are they involved in any extracurricular activities? Do they have hobbies, interests? What kind of life do they have? He loves sports. He loves to hear about kids playing sports, doing things like that. And that's another thing that he can recall, like he'll remember these children in their placement, they're playing soccer and they're doing really, really well. If they go back to parents, are they supposed to be able to do that? And those are things that he will keep in mind, and he definitely likes to hear about kids having goals, wanting to go to college, just anything about that he wants to know. And then what are the parents doing? Are they involved? Do they want to get their children back? If your only contact with a parent is at a CFTM, you're probably not going to get the best picture of the parent because they're stressed out, they're in front of DCS. I don't really like DCS. DCS just took their kids. And so it's kind of really hard to, I think, assess whether a parent wants their child back in that moment. So if at all possible, as the case progresses, now the parents aren't doing anything, they're not even going for the visits, don't make this like a focus. But if you know the parents are going for visits every single week, they're somewhat engaged in services, I like to say, you know, go see the children in their placement, go visit them at school, but then also go and visit them during a visit with their parents. And you can tell a lot by, there's a huge difference between how the parent acts in court and in a CFTM and how they act in that visit. And you can tell, you can see if a child is bonded with the parent. You can see if the parent is engaged with the the child? Is it just the substance abuse that's getting in the way of them being a parent, but then ultimately they love their kids and they're good parents? So I like to be able to report on that with my own eyes and not, you know, just what DCS is saying or just what comes out of the CXDM. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about it? It went pretty fast.
Can we ask questions or on something else?
Totally. So Courtney is, I will look at her face. We'll totally put her on the spot. So she is literally, when I started here, I was just kind of blown away with how much she knows. So yeah, I mean, she's kind of a guru. So go ahead and ask her whatever you want.
It's like some of the things you talk about, it's like, oh, I can do that? Well, was going on a family visit. Is CASA allowed to participate when mom is having visits with their child?
Yeah, absolutely. You will gauge and you'll get a good picture, a good feeling of it. Each case is unique. So if there's like high tension already at that visit, or we do have some cases where the parents don't like CASA because we've been in that specific case long enough that we've made recommendations against the parents. So on a case like that, if we went to a visit, they're kind of gonna see us as an enemy. But your case is not that way. Yours is pretty new, and we are trying to. I'm gonna talk a lot here. So in the last year and a half, DCS has changed to this like family preservation. There's a Family Preservation Act that came down from the federal level, and that law, that federal rule has made it so that DCS has to try harder for reunification. So they used to have funding that was allocated for good foster homes, and that situation, well, they've taken that funding away from the foster homes and put it into reunification. So you'll hear things like family preservation services, where there's like in-home chins, where they go in and they are like 3 times a week minimum with the mom and her children to kind of help out. So because of the way that the federal government is changing how DCS does things, we have less removals, we have more IAs, which are informal adjustments, where the CHINS court is not involved, but the parents get services, and then we have in-home CHINS, and we have trial home visits that happen a lot faster than they would have before. So we kind of looked at that and thought, we might need to shift how we handle cases too, because if we only see a child at school or only see a child in the foster home, and then 3 months in the case, DCS is putting the kids back with mom, how can we give an opinion on that if we've not seen how mom is with her kids with our own eyes? So my preference would be that, you know, your initial contact with the child should definitely be in the foster home or their placement wherever they are, because you want to know if that's safe, you want to know if the child is comfortable there. But then after that, shift to supporting the parents and seeing how they're doing and where they are. So I like to reach out to the parents and say, you know, we are not DCS, we don't work with DCS, we kind of work parallel, but we're here to support your child. We're here to support you in reunification, and become a friend of sorts to them, build a relationship with them, let them trust you. If you don't agree with something they're doing, find a nice way to say, you know, I see that you're trying and you're struggling with this. Because I don't want them to come into court thinking you're their best friend and then hear you say, well, sometimes the very reason you're not going to get that. You can be honest about that, but just kind of so that they trust you as that person. And then when you go to their visits, they might open up to you like, I'm struggling with this, or how would I do this, or how can I do this differently? Just so that it kind of helps us because we have a better picture of what they're doing. We've had, I'm sure you've seen in the news, a lot of fatalities in the last year of children that were in DCS care and then they were returned to their parents, and the child had an accident and was injured and passed away, or neglected and passed away. And when I look at that, my thought is, in some cases, we don't have a CASA because we are short CASAs to put on cases. So not in that case, but if there was a CASA, imagine if that CASA only ever saw the child in foster home. So then when DCS put the child back with the parents, how can you report on that if you don't know? And sometimes they're uncomfortable situations, so I feel like we need to be in that home that the child is most likely going to go back to, so that we can report on that. So yes, you can
Okay.
become as involved with parents as you're comfortable with.
Okay.
That's a long answer.
That
Sorry.
was great. That was a great question.
Well, when you're starting off, you don't know what your limitations are and how much contact you can have with in the visitations, because you don't want to intrude, but you would like to see what's going on.
Yeah, and if they only have like 1 2 to 4 hour visit a week, you might just stop by for a half hour, introduce yourself and let them know, and then, after, like, don't go to every single visit, but certainly, stop by for a half hour, and if they don't seem uncomfortable with you being there, feel free to stay longer. And we have a couple classes now who have become such a support for, like, the mom. I'm thinking of one specific example. She started seeing the child in placement, the child went to a trauma visit, and now she's like taking home the weight to help her out to get, supplies. She's located diapers from St. Elizabeth's or St. Mark's to get to this child, and mom will text her and say, do you know, like, I need to find a daycare, do you have any recommendations? Well, that's perfect, because then we're getting that firsthand knowledge, and we have like the best eyes on that case. So definitely, if you feel comfortable here in that situation, do that. And that court order that we have is like, sometimes you will run into people that are like, I don't care if the court order, I'm not giving you that information, and then you will reach out to us and we'll remind them that we can call judge, and he will say, you read, it's on there, you will get that information. We very rarely have to do that, so that gives you access to anything. And you don't usually need to use it that way, and if you ever feel uncomfortable, if you need to do a home visit with the parents and you've never been there before, that's why you have your case coordinator. So call them and just say, hey, I gotta go check out this home with the parents, and a little bit, we call each other still, and we, get paid to do this. We're like, I do a pop in, and they don't really like me, so we will go in teams. So don't ever feel embarrassed to be like, someone come with me just to check out the situation. You have a question?
I was just wondering, you said CHIN a couple times, and I'm not up to date on all my abbreviations of what that is.
Right, so CHINS is CHINS, it's Child in Need of Services. So when a child is detained or removed from the home, they have to have a hearing with the judge, and the judge will grant the detention and basically state, yes, this child is in need of services, and that's where we get our cases. And so there are currently 375 CHINS cases in Floyd County, 472 children being served. The extra are informal adjustments. So they're not official CHINs. They've not been removed from the parents, but the parents are receiving DCS referred services to prevent removal, hopefully. Any other questions?
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Courtney. And then again, if you ever have if you're ever in the need of any help, that's what we're here for, and we'll help you through this process. But hopefully this gave you a good overview of what it's like. Awesome. Cool.
And thank you all so much. And bring a friend. We have a lot of attention.